The last couple updates brought some really powerful hunters, with one of them actually drastically power creeping every single other hunter within the very same role, so let's find out who that is in this updated hunters tier list. And just like how I always do these videos, we of course have my previous tier list that I did make when Lennart's Neoman did release, where we have all of the top 5 hunters in the SS tier going all the way down to the D tier, where we have all of the worst hunters in the game. But not to forget as well, we of course do have 3 brand new hunters added to the game, where we had the part 1 of the Idol collab with Miyeon and Shuhua, who are very good hunters, and more importantly we do have Jinah, who is another fantastic hunter. So then, before I do rank these 3 brand new hunters, I do need to make quite a few adjustments to my current tier list, because I'm going to have to make some room for some characters into certain tiers, and also I'm going to have to be moving some down, basically just due to how the meta has now changed. And starting off with the very first change to this tier list, and it's going to be putting a new hunter down into the B tier, and this is going to be Jiru, who will go from A tier down to the B tier. And this is just because basically with the existence of Shuhua, Alicia, and also Pure Sword Princess Charhain, Jiru just doesn't really have any role to play within any water team anymore within the game. Then after Jiru, another hunter that will be moving down, this time to the A tier, is unfortunately going to be Silvermane Baekhyunho, who will go from the S tier down to the A tier. And although Baekhyunho and Charlotte have both received quite a lot of buffs since they first released, I do think Charlotte has definitely been on the better side of benefiting from them, because if you ever see stuff like Power of Destruction, where it's actually weak to the dark element, you'll pretty much notice that Charlotte is always the one that's being used over Baekhyunho, so I do think that does mean he does have to go down to the A tier. Following that then, I do want to now put 3 different hunters down into the S tier, with the very first one being Amamiya Mirei, the second being Jinah, and then the third and final one being Hansemi, who are all going to go down to that tier. And the main reason for me moving these 3 down to the S tier is simply just because I'm also going to be moving down some hunters into the S plus tier, so I just felt it wouldn't really be too fair if I ranked all of these 3 within the same category as some of the others. And speaking of moving down hunters all the way down to the S plus tier, I'm going to be moving 2 of them, with the very first one being Kane Tawata and the second one being Yu Suhyun. So don't get me wrong, both Suhyun and Kane are definitely some of the very best DPS hunters in the game still to this day. However, I do think compared to the likes of your Lennarts and also your Charhains, they are more limited to what they can be specifically used within. And that is one of the reasons why I don't think they deserve to be in the SS tier anymore, but it is also just because certain teams like the Wind team have just drastically improved, which is also why I do want to now put Goto Ryuji all the way up from the S plus tier and moving him into the SS tier as one of the very top 5 hunters in the game, because I think he deserves it. He's part of the best team in the game, especially with the release of Jinah, which of course I'll talk about in a little bit. And as we all know, Goto himself does a lot of break damage, he does a lot of regular damage himself, and also provides a huge amount of damage bonuses to his whole entire team, so I do think he deserves that top 5 spot. Alright then, that is every change I did want to make to my current tier list, and so we can now move on to ranking all of the 3 brand new hunters, starting off with Miyeon. So Miyeon is definitely one of the very top contenders for being the best light DPS in the game alongside Thomas Andre, because the vast majority of her damage does come from detonating her mana power crystals that she does create through her skills and core attacks or whatever else it may be, and once she does actually detonate them, she can do a huge amount of damage, with also all of her advancements playing a pretty massive role in what also helps increase her damage by a lot. Because starting off, we have her first advancement, which gives her a load of quality of life, with the first part of it charging her ultimate by 50% at the start of every stage, so she can get her first ultimate very, very quickly. Miyeon's A3 also allows her to stack a huge amount of shields, up to 50% of her maximum HP, whilst also increasing her defense by a huge amount, because whenever the shield effect is activated, the user's defense can increase by 6% for 30 seconds, stacking up to 10 times, so just through that alone, she can get a 60% defense increase, which will give her a massive amount of extra damage. But finally, her A5 is the most important one, because it can increase her crit stats when using her ultimate skill, and also can allow her to charge her ultimate quicker, and even reduce its cooldown, so she can pretty much use it within every single rotation. So overall, Miyeon is definitely a very, very good light DPS, and in my opinion, I do think she does deserve the spot alongside Thomas Andre all the way up into the S plus tier. I do think Thomas is slightly better, because Miyeon does struggle with actually hitting enemies sometimes when in guild boss, but aside from that, I do think their damage is pretty similar, so I do think she does deserve to also be in the S plus tier. Next up, we have Shuhua, who is the substitute DPS to your Pure Sword Princess Charhain, and overall my favorite thing about Shuhua is the fact that she pretty much has 0 mana issues, because all of her damage does come from her core attacks. And this is because we have buffs like Performance, which help increase her core attack damage by up to 50% on her A3, which is very, very powerful. And on top of that, when you look at Shuhua's high energy buff, buff, which gets enhanced through her A1. It basically allows her to increase her core attack damage even further by 100% because it changes to high energy beats, but more importantly, she can allow herself to not consume any of the charge from her core attack gauge, meaning she can spam it very, very quickly. And when you then further combine that with her A5, which basically says using Starlight Howl activates volume up, which is another buff that she gets access to, which increases the user's damage dealt by 30% and also her critical hit rate by 30%. So this will increase her consistency with her critting by a lot. But more importantly, the attack speed of high energy beat, and this is again her enhanced core attack, will significantly increase, and this allows her to use her core attacks even quicker, giving her way more damage. So in terms of where this actually ranks her within this tier list, I do think she is only going to go all the way up to the S tier, despite her being a very powerful DPS character. And my main reason for this is simply just because you're not really going to be using Shuhua too much, because the Pure Sword Princess Charhain does exist, and she is just a far superior main DPS for you to use within pretty much any content you want to play. And this for me does mean that she's going to go into the S tier, whereas Miyeon is going to go into the S plus tier, because I do think she can compete for being the best like DPS in the game, whereas Shuhua just can't. Finally then, we of course now need to talk about Jinah, and you'll have probably noticed that in the SS tier, or the top 5 as I like to call it, there's actually only 4 hunters in it, and this is going to be because Jinah is going to go all the way up into that top 5. So one of the main reasons that I'm putting Jinah into the SS tier is of course going to be because of her advancements, as if we take a look at her A2 to start off with, and this says that it can enhance the Wings of Freedom effect, and this can now basically say it will increase your whole entire team's basic and ultimate skill damage by 20%, as well as further increasing your team's win damage by 10%, but even more importantly, it can now activate the unrecoverable effects onto the target whenever someone does use their ultimate. And if you don't know already, Lennart's Neiman gets a pretty massive damage bonus when he is attacking an enemy with unrecoverable or just any form of HP recovery, so Jinah being able to apply this, it makes her the perfect support for Lennart. She also has some pretty massive stat increases, because through the A3 buff of Wind's Touch, she can increase your whole entire team's attack and defense by 20% to win team members, as well as also their basic skill damage by up to 10%. And finally, what does separate Jinah from literally every other support in the game, and in my opinion does make her power creep all of them, is because of her A5, and more so the Serenade Aero Disruption that she can actually now utilize in only teamfight mode. So this is where she is very, very powerful, and this will deal damage equal to 300% of Stormwind Serenade, and this is basically activated after her ultimate is used, and with her then being able to further reduce its cooldown by 60%, and on top of that, with Jinah being a hunter who generates her ultimate charge very, very quickly, it essentially turns her into a very, very powerful DPS, because if you put her into Guild Boss with the 8 set of Chaotic Infamy, she no longer just becomes a hunter who supports your team, she becomes someone who supports your team whilst also doing a huge amount of damage at the very same time. So there you have it, this is my complete and updated hunters tier list with every hunter inside of Solo Leveling Arise, and overall, if you did enjoy this video or you just found it useful in general, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, I will see you all in the next video. Peace!